Hello and welcome to the White Deer Filmmaking Podcast. I'm Al, this is Mark, and we have Adam in the background as well, covering today's episode.
I am 90% sure you're about to go, I'm Mark, and this is Al.
Yeah, I nearly did. Nearly
See?
slipped up there.
You so well.
But that confusion at least allowed you to not say why.
Yeah. Exactly.
And now you said it, we
Breaking mould.
nearly didn't go. Yes, today we have a friend from across the pond, Andrew, and he is talking to us about his film Ghost in the Gun, which, you'll find this out, is an incredible film simply because of just how good it is, and it's his first film.
It's his first
Wow,
film.
no, it's honestly brilliant.
You would not think it's his first film.
No, it looks amazing, and everything together just brilliant. If you get a chance to watch it, I mean, we'll obviously have all the links we can to it, but obviously festival circuits permitting, things like that. But yeah, get a chance to see it. It's a Western. It is about probably what you'd imagine from the title, a gun which has the spirit or soul of a previous owner within it, and it
Has a vengeful presence.
exactly, and causes new owners of the gun to seek revenge.
Those who have wronged them.
Indeed, very interesting premise.
Yeah.
And when you break it down like that, it makes it even more interesting, and especially the way they delivered it is phenomenal. And
So when you imagine ghosts and guns,
you
you can understand why it won Best Thriller and Best Visual Effects.
yes, in our November-December 2019 bi-monthly awards. Yeah, really good. You'll enjoy listening to Andrew. If you're a UK listener, you'll find that the experiences in America are slightly different, so it's nice listening to that way of doing things. Additionally, he's just a nice guy. So yeah, really good to hear him. Make sure to stay tuned to the end, where we'll give you the weekly code. Anything else?
No, I think we can jump in.
Jump straight in. Okay.
What's going on?
Right. Enjoy the interview.
Thank you once again for speaking to us. It's honestly a pleasure, and especially with your film, we both loved it so much that it's a bit of a privilege for you to be speaking to us. So thank you for
coming on.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on the film? Just out of curiosity.
Really good. Really high quality. Everything looked really professional, and I think, well, we'll obviously ask the specific questions in the interview itself, but I'd like to know just, like where the ideas came from and everything like that. So lots of great stuff.
It's a very interesting concept.
Exactly. Yeah.
Spirit in a firearm. It's
With a lot of things, it's all sort of serendipitous, right? Like, I'm part of this film co-op in San Francisco called Scary Cow, and we basically help each other make films, and that's how we, have a lot of this volunteer crew and stuff. And one of the directors there wanted to do a Western, and I got really interested in that, and I wanted to help out. But then he ended up having to shelf that idea because he had other things to do. And so I started thinking to myself, like, what would I make if I made a Western? And I was talking with one of my friends, Eric Lind, and we were doing some projects together at the time, and kind of throwing some stuff around. And he actually had the idea for the initial setup of the story, which was, a man like waking up in the desert and like there being, this haunted gun and stuff. So I took that, and then I had this idea for the dramatic theme, which was like conflicting agendas of revenge. So then I started working on a script for that, and I was gonna pitch it to that other director, but then since he moved on to other stuff, I decided maybe I should just, produce it myself. So, I polished the script a bunch and sent it to some film festivals, and it did pretty well. So I figured like I had a good chance to, produce it. And then I did Indiegogo funding to help, raise some money. So like, a third of it I put in, a third my family, and a third from like, friends and people on Indiegogo. So we were able to raise the funds. And so pre-production took, I don't know, maybe 9 months.
Okay.
And then we started shooting this was way back in 2015, actually. So this project has been about 5 years. It's been really a labor of love.
Yeah.
And even though the shooting the film, like the principal photography was challenging, it wasn't actually the hardest part of the film. Like, so we shot over about, I think, 13 days across maybe like 2.5 months. So we got done in a reasonable amount of time. But then when it came to post-production and editing, that's when the real difficulty came, because we did some like test screenings with some people, and they didn't get just some of the basic like story narrative, like, that there was even like this haunted gun or, ghost in a gun, even though it's in the title, right? And, and they would confuse some characters because originally I didn't want to show who the original gunslinger was. So that hanging scene was shot as a point of view, but then people confused that with, the guy that wakes up in the desert. So like, we tried all these different permutations of the cut, and it still just wasn't quite there. And I was kind of banging my head against it for like 2 years. Finally, one of my other friends from Scary Cow, Rena, like, she's like, oh, you need any help? And we just started meeting with her regularly, and we just kind of first figured out exactly what the narrative issues were, and then we would just kind of attack them one at a time and problem solve them. And so, for example, like for that hanging scene, which was originally point of view, it turned out there was enough space in the frame where we could digitally composite someone in. So, I ended up asking Tim Russ, who did the voiceover for the, Ghost in the Gun, whether he'd be willing to be in front of the camera, and he, graciously accepted. So we shot a green screen thing down in Burbank, and then we just kind of added him in. And then other things like, kind of establishing the gun, I decided to do an animated title sequence because, other movies kind of use that, and it's an easy way to give some context before the movie starts. And so I happened to, when I was in London, actually, for a wedding for one of my good friends, like one of the bridesmaids had some animator friends in Belgium. So she connected me with them, and they helped me to do the animated title sequence. And actually kind of the style kind of falls in line with a lot of Westerns, spaghetti Westerns. So it ended up going, doing pretty well. So we ended up, kind of addressing these narrative issues one at a time. And then Rena had this brilliant idea, which is to treat like the main character as, the mysterious stranger, which is, a thing in Westerns. So that actually allowed us to break up sort of the linear structure of the story and kind of reconstitute things in it. And it really focused, the parts that were like the girl. And, by doing a flashback, we were able to like really consolidate things. And I took out things like there's a montage that I just never quite worked. So after that kind of revelation, everything just kind of fell into place, and we were able to finish it, by like mid last year, 2019.
Wow, brilliant. And I think one of the things, just to pick up on one of the things that you just mentioned there, the animated intro scene that you did use, that for me was the, because obviously it comes quite early on in the film, that for me really grabbed my attention as well as it helps to set up the premise. I think it was a nice visual, I guess, callback to that Western feel. It was really well done, really well executed, and also added to the I guess the production quality of it, because the rest of the film is very high quality as well, and it visually just ties in with everything else so well. But it was interesting to hear that it actually was used to help the narrative become clearer. So that's very, very interesting. It might be, is that something which you mentioned that you've got the community that you work with? Is it something that they've been helpful with previously on other films or things that you've done?
You mean sort of like the production quality, or which aspect?
I guess maybe problem solving in certain ways.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think that's probably the case in all filmmaking. I mean, it's the difference with filmmaking compared to like other arts, in my opinion, is that you're working through other people, especially if you're like the director, producer or something, right? Like you can't decide everything and fix everything yourself. You're creating art, you're shaping it, but it's through other people. So it's that collaboration that really makes the difference. My cinematographer, who was amazing, Stephen Burke, he was also part of Scary Cow, but he does a lot of professional work too. So like the look of the film, you can pretty much credit him because and he gave me some really great advice at the beginning, which was put the money in front of the camera, right? So I know a lot of people, will spend money on the camera itself, get like a fancy, red camera, all this and that. But he said, no, put your money in front of the camera, meaning like, spend it on like the wardrobe and the props and the location and all that stuff. Because once that looks good, like then he can kind of take care of the rest. So he ended up using his own camera, which was like a Blackmagic, and we rented, like some lenses and stuff. But pretty much, we focused on like making sure the production with quality was high, and also making sure we had good actors and all that stuff. And then then he also did the coloring in post, so that really also made it look amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
In terms of some of the locations you use, there's some great locations in there. I mean, whereabouts, which specific locations were you using for filming, and how much of the set design was sort of built from the ground up?
So I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, so a lot of these locations are nearby or in California. So like to the east in sort of the Livermore area, there's a few ranches there, and there was a scene at the Three Steves Winery. There's like Rhinestein Ranch. There was and also Tracy. There was like the Lone Tree Ranch, which we shot some scenes at, like the barn scene. And then like for the town, right, in the shootout scene, that was at a private ranch in Hollister, California. And so felt really lucky to find that place, because when I was doing the initial location scouting, there's a lot of Western related places in California, but they're all touristy. So they have modern elements like light poles and concrete and things like that, which when you're visiting it you don't think about, but when you're trying to shoot, like it would be really hard to cover it up or like exclude it from the shots. So we end up finding this ranch down in Hollister where they built sort of a Western replica town. And they rented out for other things, including like weddings, but they allowed us to film there. And then for sort of the desert scenes with kind of like the strange looking rocks, like that's actually in Toronto Pinnacles, California, a little bit west of Death Valley. And a lot of other films and TV shows have been shot there. Like I think Star Trek, like the original series, or other sort of shows where they're trying to get this weird kind of alien rocky environment. A lot of times it's in Toronto Pinnacles. And that, you just need a permit from the state, and the California Film Commission actually helped me find that location.
Brilliant, excellent. So there was a lot of attention placed on getting getting everything right in front of the camera in terms of costuming things. Was that particularly challenging, or was it something which came quite easily?
Well, I mean, everything was challenging, right? But the good thing was, I found really good casting crew. So, like the set design and, the makeup and the costumes and all that, there was a team of people, and like, because there's no way I could make all the decisions. So they kind of figured out the style of like the wardrobe and, how to dress the sets and stuff. The one thing I did help with, for that was the wagon, right? Because we were trying to figure out how do you find a wagon. It's not easy, but one of my producers, Sam Purdy, found it on Craigslist, and it was just kind of derelict and stuck in their front yard for many years. So, the price of it was like super cheap. I forget what it was, probably like $50 or something, but it cost us more to get it out of the yard than it did to like buy it, because we had to rent like a truck that had a winch that we could pull it out and dig it up. And stuff. So we moved it from there all the way down to Hollister, and then then the production designer and her team like kind of dressed it up and stuff. So that was a lot of fun.
Excellent. What was the size of the crew in total?
So since we had so many shoot days, like we didn't have the same people at every shoot day, but so in total, I think the crew was over 100 people over the course of 2 months. So it was, when you look at the credits, it's like, it takes more than a village. Sometimes it takes a city.
Sure. So where did you find the cast that you worked with? Are they people you've worked with before, or were they completely new actors that you were working with and bringing onto set?
They are mostly new actors. The only one that I knew from before was my producer, Tony Jonick. He played Coyote Gus, who is, the guy with the bowler hat. So that was fun to see him on film. But the rest of the cast, we did a casting call. We used, I think, it was something, at the time it was like sfcasting.com or whatever, which I think is defunct now. But, we used sort of like the local casting resources and stuff. And so, yeah, a lot of the actors and extras and stuff were from that. But for the main character, Krug, like we went through SAG to find him because I wanted to make sure we had a really strong lead to really carry the film. So he was a really important casting thing. And then also Tim Russ, I contacted him through some producer connections that I had. So yeah, I reached out to him and he, agreed to do the film. So that was really cool.
How did you find immersing the cast into that Western feel? Was that something that they understood straight away, or was it something that needed to be worked on? And was there any kind of specific training that they had to go through in order to make it more authentic?
I think they jumped into it pretty easily, because one of the things that I think drew people to the project was as a Western, and so it was kind of fun, and they, all wanted to do it already. So I think it was fairly easy for them to get into it. With respect to training, there wasn't anything specific, but like the actors, both, Darren Bridget, who played Krug, and Ross Turner, who played the sheriff, they practiced doing the gun twirl, because that was used. So, but I didn't even have to ask them to do that specifically. They were just kind of doing that on their own, and it really, added to the scenes. So, there really wasn't much else that they needed to train for. Like some of the stunts, my stunt coordinator, Darren Breen, he kind of worked with the actors and stuff to do, and we did some practice stuff, but that was mostly like on set or during the day before we shot. So we didn't have to do that sort of prep ahead of time.
Brilliant. Yeah, let's go.
I mean, you might have mentioned this already, Andrew, but I mean, what would be the most memorable moment on set, or moments? What really stands out?
Well, there's several, right? I really wish I had a behind the scenes crew to film it, because that was a story in of itself. But one of them was in the original script, instead of shooting the rock, I had a scene where after Krug turns into the gunslinger, he shoots a vulture, and the vulture drops. But we, for some reason, could not find a vulture prop, or at least not one that was realistic enough. And the ones that were realistic enough were from taxidermists, and they didn't want to lend it to us for it to get dirty or whatever. So we were looking and searching up to the very day that we shot that scene. So kind of the night before, I had to just make the decision to change that scene on the fly. And so I ended up deciding to do it as him practicing with the rock pile instead, which I think actually made the movie better. It really turned out better than. Because I can imagine that shooting the vulture could have, depending on how it was shot, could end up looking cheesy. So just doing sort of the rock practice thing, I think worked better. And my favorite shot of the whole movie is actually when he shoots the rock and it kind of pops. That was a practical effect, and it only took one take. So so it was amazing, and if you see the outtakes, you'll see Darren Breen, he's, he pops up, his head pops up after we're done with that shot, because he used this pole with some of the pop cap stuff at the end to and we just timed it right, so he pushed it up, hit the rock, and then it had that pop.
Yeah. It's very, very good, and very exciting as well. I think one of the things that you've captured within the film is, well, I actually didn't really know what to expect, especially from the protagonist, the way that his arc ends essentially. And I think that's one thing I remember from like westerns especially, is that the tenseness and not really knowing what is going to happen, and knowing that the hero sometimes isn't going to get exactly what he wants. I thought that was really well done in your film, and sort of leads on to the question. For those that have seen the film, they will know that a singular protagonist isn't that doesn't mean, you know, whatever happens to them, that doesn't mean that the film is over, because the ghost is in the gun itself, and the ghost follows where the gun goes. Are there plans for any future stories with the same feature?
There are hopes. There are many hopes. So
Brilliant.
yeah, I purposefully left the door open for many more stories, right? And I have like several ideas, and I just kind of need to sit down and write the scripts for them.
Yeah.
But my hope would be to turn it into a TV series, actually. Yeah. I mean, people have asked, you know, would you make it into a movie? And sure, we definitely could. But I always had the idea to make it more of like an anthology, where you would have different people encounter the gun, and you would have sort of these standalone stories, but they would be connected with, you know, with the gun and like the overall story of the original gunslinger.
Well, yeah, I think that works really well, actually. So I think it's probably, I think you've probably figured out already the correct, maybe not correct, but the maybe the best format for that type of story, because I was hooked. I was really interested from seeing the original owner of the gun, and I wanted to know more about him, simply because of the power that has now sort of resulted from his experience, and that could be shared weekly, however it's released. I think it's such a powerful concept that you have created. So I would be very in favor.
Yeah, because I kind of want to dive into how do different people deal with, you know, vengeance and that anger, and yeah, like the other thing I want to do was explore kind of like the time period, because if you look, you know, in the history, like just within those few decades, so much, you know, had happened, right? Like there was like the Intercontinental Railroad, there's the Civil War, you know, there was like the Gold Rush, there was, you know, in Japan, like, you know, they just, you know, there was like the end of the samurai period and stuff. So there's like so many things like happening like in the West and like in the world at that time. And I was also inspired by, like, in the 90s, there was a Young Indiana Jones like TV show that and they, you know, they had sort of like in Indiana when he was young, and then when he was like a little bit older as a teenager, and they would just kind of jump back and forth between the different time periods. And so each like new episode, you weren't sure which one you were going to get. And I kind of like that. And I would hope to be able to just jump between time periods in a non-linear way, and just, you know, so you can kind of focus on the character for that particular episode, but then start to piece together kind of like the world of that time.
Just a quick question about the iconic gun itself as a prop. Did you have much input in how it looked visually?
Yeah, because I was searching online for a gun, because I wanted to be, you know, like a fancy looking gun. So I searched for a long time to find one, and yeah, it's like 1850 something, like Navy style pistol. So yeah, I was just able to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, it's I think it really helped sell it as something to take note of initially, and it's one thing I made a note of was how it looked compared to the colouring of the clothes that the actors wore. So they're being quite muted colours, and this gun really stands out. And I think visually, you know that it's it's got something going for it, and it is an important piece of the storytelling, just the visual representation of this gun, which has so much power and something about it. Yeah, I thought it was a really good choice.
Yeah, and the sort of decorative things on it like end up helping us with the animated title sequence, right? Because the artist was inspired to use that to help explain, like, you know, the possession. And so when you see that visually, like it coming from the gun and into another person, it really helped to tell that story. So it's just, you know, really fortunate that these sort of things came together.
Brilliant.
So tell us more about you, Andrew. You know, what's been happening since the film was completed? You know, are you making new projects at the minute?
Well, I've been trying to take it easy because since it took like 5 years, I'm just glad that it's done. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been focusing more on the film festivals,
Mm-hmm.
yours included. So I've submitted to a bunch, and I'm kind of hoping to hear back from the annual ones, this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually going down to LA this coming weekend for a couple of them.
Nice.
So yeah, so that should be fun. And then, like I'll see how it does. And then if there's interest, maybe I can find some investors that want to help fund sort of the future iterations or whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than that, yeah, I've just been, I don't know. So I have a regular day job in the tech industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I normally do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is filmmaking your passion? Is that what you enjoy doing the most? Is it something which how did you discover like filmmaking and wanting to be a part of that world, just from the earliest memory that you can of being a filmmaker?
Well, my family's always been film buffs, right? Like I remember like growing up watching, classic films, black and white films and stuff with my mom and my sister. And so, I ended up, remembering people, the actors' names and the directors and the stories and like, really keying into the dialogue and that sort of thing. So filmmaking, I think since, when I was growing up was something I was interested in, but then, I went to the, technical fields. So, I went to university for computer science and all that. So I always thought to do filmmaking, I'd have to, take a break and go back to film school and learn all of that. But then a few years ago, I was at a retreat and, I kind of wasn't sure what I would do kind of with my profession and, what I should do next. So I was talking with one of my friends there and she asked, like, what do you feel like doing? What are you passionate about? And I was thinking about, I was like, oh yeah, filmmaking. I would really love to do that, but it just seemed like not accessible to me at the time. So then I started thinking, well, wait, I mean, maybe there are things now that are around me that I could learn how to do that, right? Some classes or something like that. So that's when I started, Googling for it, and I found Scary Cow online, and they are in San Francisco. They're like a local film incubator and co-op. And so, I just started going there, and helping other people make their films and learning firsthand how to do all the different things from being, like a grip or, well, you always start off as like a PA, an assistant, right? Production assistant. But then, I did that, learned some lighting, was like camera operator, did like, assistant director, that sort of thing. And then eventually, like, I settled in on like location sound. So that's what I ended up being known for. But and then after a while, I was, thinking about what my own project would be. And then this whole, Western thing came up. And so that's how I ended up making Ghost in the Gun.
Excellent. So is this your first?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's a really good.
It's a very good first.
It's incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really good. So then potentially, I'll get your opinion on this. Is a lesson that you may have learned that you don't necessarily need to have gone to study filmmaking. You can learn on the job. And work your way between departments, learning new things, new skill sets. Is that something that you could recommend?
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant.
Because I've also talked to people who have gone to film school, and so you definitely learn the theory of it, and you get connected with other people that are in the industry or just also interested. So, and I think the most valuable thing about that is it gives you the dedicated time to focus on that. So if you have other people that want to learn how to make films, you can do it. But that's not the only avenue that exists, especially nowadays, right? Because the barrier to entry is so low. Like people have, their smartphones with like, high quality cameras on them. Like everything's digital and like the editing software is pretty easy to get. Like some are free, like, iMovie or whatever. So it's fairly easy to start, right? So if you just go out and do it, like my first like short was just me filming like my friend's dog and stuff like that, and just like, like playing around with different angles and things like that, and then editing. So like, and there are other organizations. There's like places that offer classes. There's like lots of like film groups in different cities. So my recommendation would be just go out and do it. Find, you know, what resources around you, make the most of that, and like, you know, connect with other people who also want to make films.
Yeah, that's what we found as well. I think just exploring what you have available to you, making the most of it, and just going back to what you said earlier. Put if you can put the best things in front of the camera, you know, the quality of equipment that will come in time. Once you get to know that your craft better, you'll meet people which can provide equipment, and it will come in time, as long as you work on your skill sets, and work on the craft of making films. It's nice to hear that is being experienced elsewhere too. Yeah, it's really good to hear.
Because the one thing that keeps getting reinforced is how important it is to get the story right. Because once you do that, then everything else follows, right? Because, you know, if you focus too much on special effects or whatever, like, you know, it's just not a compelling story. But like, you know, make sure you have like a solid script before you start, you know, and it's going to change. Like, there's just no way around that. But you got to start with a good script, and then you got to find the actors that will, like, you're giving them sort of a sandbox to play in, right? Because there's so many things that are part of the characters and the performance and stuff that you can't imagine ahead of time, and that's what the actors are for. So what I learned about being a director is that you have sort of the overall vision, and you're helping to kind of shape that and shepherd that, but you want to create these sandboxes for every single department and person in your cast and crew, so that they can like bring in like what they are great at and their ideas and that sort of thing. And so as long as like everyone's kind of going toward the same direction in that unified vision, then you know that will help you make a really great, you know, film.
Yes. Completely agree with you, Andrew.
Just wanted to we're gonna have to start wrapping up now because we've reached, it's going so quickly, but we've reached our time limit. Wanted to ask you just a couple of questions, or just about the VFX that you chose to use. So one of the I think probably the most prominent effects that you featured would be potentially like the eyes, like the changing of the eyes and how that helped the narrative. Was that something that you had envisioned prior to, or was it a suggestion that was made?
Well, I always had the idea that like his eyes would glow, like that was in the original script, but the look of that had changed and was just kind of up in the air all the way to the very end in post-production, basically, because it's hard to choose one that doesn't look too cheesy or, you know, make it too comical, right? Because and we ended up using a look that was inspired by what's it called, pitch black, or you know, the Riddick. Because I originally thought it would glow and it would be like white, but then it didn't quite look right in some of the VFX testing. And you know, you might see like that sort of glow like in Stargate SG-1, sorry. But it wasn't quite right, and I didn't want it to be red because I didn't want to give the impression that he was evil, because, you know, we want to kind of understand who he is, and he has a complex story too. So I wanted it to be more of a like a neutral color, like white. So we tried a bunch of different things and just end up going with the Riddick eyes.
Yeah, no, I think it works really well. With it being quite I suppose a neutral
tone.
Exactly. It implies that ghostly element, doesn't it? It's like you say, with it not being red or a particularly strong color per se, it does leave the audience to wonder, you know, is the ghost and that idea of revenge, is it good? Is it bad? It does, you know. It probably just is different for each character that you feature. So I think it's a very smart choice. Very smart choice.
We don't know yet. And one of the things that I learned about directing was also most of the time you're actually trying to strip things down and to kind of turn things down and not make it so prominent. Like subtle is often better.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we are running quickly out of time. Are there any final questions from you, Al, at all?
No, just I think the main thing is how can people follow you, Andrew? Follow your progress.
So on Facebook, it's just Ghost in the Gun, And you can also find the project on filmfreeway.com. And yeah, like just if you use the social tag like hashtag like Ghost in the Gun or GITG, we'll see your posts. We're also on Twitter and Instagram.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you once again for speaking to us. What we'll do is we'll stop the recording now and just have a debrief, really. But thank you so much for speaking to us. Very impressed with the film. It is brilliant quality and just a very good story. I think that's the most important thing as well. It is a great story, has a lot of potential, and really excited to see where it goes.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
All right.
Okay, that was Andrew Chen discussing his film Ghost and Gun. Really nice, yeah. It's really difficult sometimes with these podcasts when the audience doesn't. Obviously, they can't see the film. We get the privilege of seeing them, and it's just a shame that until they're finished on the circuit, it's so difficult to relate, fully
go into depth with everything that the film can bring.
Yes,
but it does give the interview did give real good insight into life across the pond.
Exactly.
You know, how the American film industry is perhaps different, and how the progression as a crew member is very different perhaps to our own.
And we were thinking about this, if it's of interest to listeners, viewers, to explore that concept, we might do it where we get a guest on that's been on previously that can discuss that sort of thing with us. If not, then fine. But just in general, as filmmakers, I'd like to know. I think because it is something different, it might be something which is relatable, maybe can help communication across different nationalities and things. So if that's of interest, let us know. But incredible film, and especially with it being his first, there's so much I think you could talk to him about and just get more insight. So really enjoyed that. But now for the most important part,
Code of the week.
The code of the week. 10% off any entry. Al, would you like to share this one?
Of course I can. Yes. So your code this week is WDPODAC802. That's WDPODAC802.
So use it and abuse it, and we look forward to receiving your entries. Anything else?
Which they can submit via Film Freeway. We are White Deer International Film Festival. Obviously, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're on all the usual channels. Podcast is available on Spotify as well.
Excellent. Shoot us any questions. Have a good day. Bye.